about fastening our walls to the floating subfloor. Again, we have the dimple mat, the insulation, and then the subfloor floating on top of it. The floor I did not screw down or lag down to the concrete. Alright, so what we're using here, we're going to use 2.5-inch deck screws. You can use outdoor screws, coated screws. I prefer to use a coated screw just so it's protected, doesn't rust as much. We're fairly dry down here, so now that we've got all of our insulation stuff down, but just my preference. That's going to get me through the 1.5-inch of the plate, and then it's basically about just shy of an inch thickness on the subfloor. So that screw is going to give me bite all the way through the subfloor and just a little bit more, but it's going to be able to hold that plate really well. Here I've mocked up a little bench test to give you a demonstration of what I'm talking about. So what we've got here is we've got a 1.5 section which represents a bottom plate of our wall. Here is our Advantech subfloor. You can see the thickness here. And here's a piece of the foam. What we're using to secure these are 2.5-inch deck screws. So when we sink that deck screw to the top of that plate, you can see that at 2.5 inches, that deck screw is going to penetrate just beyond the bottom of our Advantech subfloor. It's going to come through by about maybe an eighth to a quarter inch there, roughly about an eighth. But you can see that it allows us to have the threads of that screw bite all the way into the subfloor, the thickness of the subfloor. And that screw is going to penetrate through a little bit to the foam, but nowhere near enough to compromise the moisture and vapor barrier that we've created. So here you can see, and I put this really close to the edge of the wood, which you wouldn't normally be doing, but just to give a demonstration, you can see that the screw has come all the way down and just through the bottom of the subfloor layer, right there. And so when this wall is set on top of our foam, like it will be here, the edge of that screw is going to penetrate that deep into the foam, which is not compromising anywhere near our insulation value, creating any kind of thermal bridge between the screw, the floor, or the concrete that would be underneath it. And again, we have our dimple mat vapor barrier underneath all of that as well. You can see how that construction will ultimately work. But now I've got my bottom plate right in line along that chalk line, so that I know it's in the right position. Now I'm going to screw the bottom plate first, and we'll worry about the top plate afterwards. Get the bottom plate on our mark so it's in position, and then we'll worry about leveling the rest of our wall and screwing up into the joists. After we got our walls fastened to the floor and in line, then I mentioned we're going to level and align our walls at the top plate. And we're not going to use screws here. I just used some nails with my pneumatic nailer and popped the nail in through the top plate up into the joist. If we're using shims, you just go through the shim, make sure the shim's nice and fastened. Or if we've measured our studs to make sure that we've got the top plate in line, we're going to go right through the top plate into there. We don't need one at every joist, just every other one or so is just fine. Now what this is going to do is going to keep the floor very nice and solid to the bottom plate. So because of the screws. The screws are going to hold that bottom plate in place. When you shoot your nails into the top plate, you want to try to go as straight up and vertical as possible. That way, as you get any kind of thermal growth or things moving, it's going to move a little bit along that nail if it needs to. Now again, the thermal expansion you're going to experience down here in this basement is going to be very minimal. I've calculated it to be fractions of an inch. And I literally mean fractions, but the temperature down here does not change very drastically, maybe by about 20 degrees. So the thermal expansion you get from the wood at 20 degrees is pretty minimal.